Welcome to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Philippa.
And me, Julie. And this episode really is a pondering play and therapy. And this comes out of the conversation, Philippa, you and I had over the last few days about really what the title play therapy means, what it means to parents, to school staff, to other professionals. And my ponderings as a play therapist about the difference, I think, that other people see in thinking about play therapy. It's therapy that will help my child know how to play, which is often what referrals are about. And as I work with colleagues who are music therapists, arts and therapists, dance movement therapists, drama therapists, and I've never checked this out with my colleagues, but do they ever get referrals from parents, particularly if they're working with families? Oh, my child isn't very good at music, so I'll send them to music therapy. My child isn't very good at drama, I'll send them to drama therapy. Not very good at art, and so on, dance movement. I have a feeling that doesn't happen, but absolutely open to being wrong about that. But I feel that probably about half of my referrals for play therapy are from parents, or generally parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, social workers, school staff. This child that I'm thinking about isn't very good at playing, or is behind with playing, or really has no concept of play. Can they come to you for play therapy and you can teach them how to play? Now, this is something I wonder about a lot, and I wonder about it with my students. I wonder about it in reviewing candidates who are hoping to be play therapists, and really what is there and my understanding of what it is we're about. Is my role as a play therapist to teach a child how to play, or even if I take out the teach, to be alongside a child as they discover how to play? And I suppose that's really my ponderings for today, is somehow, is play therapy seen differently to the other creative arts therapies?
And my wonderings about that are that if you can't draw, if you can't sing, if you can't play the piano, if you can't dance, and I guess there's an interpretation of that, but dance and play, all these things within what the socially accepted, oh, that's a great piece of music, or that's a lovely dance, or that's a whatever it is, then I guess as adults, we expect that children can't do that. We expect that they need to learn to draw, to play the piano, to sing a song, to whatever it is. We anticipate that there's a level of learning, and often children go to music classes, to dance classes, to whatever, don't they, after school? And actually it's taught in school. Music is taught in school. Art is taught in school. Play isn't taught in school. You don't have a curriculum that says we're going to play. That's not a lesson. We have PE, but that's about physical activity. But it's not, it is play, but it's not the play that we're thinking about. The play where the 4-year-old goes and plays with friends in the park, and they end up in the sand pit and they chuck sand all over their little mates, or they bite another child, or they kick another child. And so I guess there's an expectation that we can play, and we do play. And how often do parents, carers, adults say, oh, just share that toy, be kind. We give instructions around the play, but and I guess we do teach play when we are modeling it, but I wonder if there's just an expectation that we know how to play. And if you aren't playing within the realms of this socially accepted norm for your age, I guess at 1 years old, you're more lenient with kids throwing stuff than you are at 5 years old, maybe. We expect that there's a development in this play that means that they are more within the norms or the parameters that we expect them to be. And when they're not, I wonder if as the big people caring for children, you think, oh my gosh, there's something wrong. I need my child to be able to go and play so he can access this with his friends, so he can do these things, so he's not getting into trouble. I wonder if it's just seen in a very different way than than the other things. I don't know.
No, that's something I hadn't thought about, play not being on the national curriculum, which is the sort of the England and Wales curriculum. I'm sure Scotland has its own national curriculum, and other countries. Music, art, dance as part of physical education, drama, they might all appear within a timetable at a primary school, certainly in the UK. But you're right, play time is seen as outside the curriculum. You're outside, usually outside, you're playing, but that's seen as an addition. It's almost seen as a reward. It's something that in some schools, and I hope that fewer and fewer now, it's seen as a treat for the children. You're allowed out to your playtime if you've done all your work. You're doing
often that's withdrawn, isn't it? You have to stay in it. I had to stay in at playtimes and lunchtimes a lot when I was at school, unless I was doing sports, and then I was allowed to do whatever I liked. But nobody withdraws you from art, do they? Or music. I would have loved to have been withdrawn from music. You can't go to music. You need to sit here and write 100 lines.
You just said yes.
Lines is not great, but I would have missed the music willingly. But not my break time. So yeah, it's used as a punishment.
Yeah, you can't have your break time because you've not done something, or you've been horrible to another child, because you've been slow, because you've been whatever it is, and you may be denied your playtime. But I'm hoping schools and school staff are realizing, as many of us are, as we do over the years, that actually denying a child their playtime actually makes life even harder for them and the other pupils and the staff members after that lost break time. They're the very children who need to be outside. They might need it scaffolding a bit. But going back to what you're saying about if a child is perceived to not be good, and that inverted commas, at music, or they're trained, we're trained. I'm the opposite to you. Music was the one lesson. I loved most of my lessons. I wasn't kept in many times. And I loved music, and I was fortunate to be able to learn the recorder, learn the piano, learn many other instruments, and loved all that. So you and I, quite opposite.
Let me tell you though, I will tell you this though. I did have to do music. I don't know. We had to do that, and you had to pick an instrument or something that you could play. So people picked the recorder or the triangle or something. I picked the cello, the biggest, most difficult, just so I could have this big, massive cello case. I don't think I ever learned to play it, but I carried it around for a little while. I was like, as difficult as I could possibly make it for everybody in my life, I chose the cello.
That sums up so much for both of us. But going back to that, there's the learning of the skills, say, of an instrument, or professional type singing, or particular art skills, particular dance movements. But if I think about very early development in the womb, as well as in those first few years of life, music, sound, rhythm is there innately. We know that a child will move to certain sounds that they can hear when they're in the womb. We know that they will startle and move their bodies. We know that they can have rhythmic movements and movements that are often then repeated after birth. The shape that we form in the womb is often the shape that we'll sleep with for the rest of our lives. I know I sleep with my hand under my chin a lot. And I was born well before there were any ultrasounds, but I wonder if there had been an ultrasound, that would have been one of my movements. And it continues to be a movement that's comfortable to me. So I think there's the teaching about a creative art form, music, art, dance, drama, play, but not play. And I think that's the difference. Play, as you said, isn't taught. And yet it is taught.
Not formally taught, is it? There's not a formal, we are going to sit down now in reception or in preschool and teach you how to play. It's not a formal thought, but you are taught, aren't you, with interactions?
Yeah, you're given loads and loads, many little ones and big ones are given so many opportunities to develop play, and that is scaffolded by the adults around them. Play activities are set up, certainly in nursery schools, early years, up to age 4, 5, 6. Play activities are set up. So I wonder if we can go back on what we were saying earlier, that play isn't taught. From what I can see, I live next door to a children's nursery. I can see different days they set up different activities. Today is something about our fans squishing things. Today is something about building blocks. I can see that they have within their rhythm of their week taught elements of what I might call play.
I suppose I would wonder about that in a little way. And what I would wonder is the purpose of setting that up to teach play, or is the purpose of that setting up to teach cognitive development? And I know the outcome might be play, but there's a different pressure with it. If you are being taught to put, I don't know, to do something where you're learning the colors or you're learning the shapes, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be doing those. Those are absolutely needed, aren't they? Because children need to learn the shapes, they need to learn the colors, they need to learn the words, and that's fun. But that is a structured kind of play in many ways, rather than playing in the park and getting in the sand pit with 5 other kids whilst your big people are maybe having a conversation with one another or looking after your sibling. They're different types of play, aren't they? And I wonder if I'm just thinking this, I'm wondering if we accept that children need the teaching play, the play that gets them school ready, but we don't always think about the free and imaginative play. Do you know what I mean? Where children get and just have to get on with it on their own and actually spend some time being bored and finding things to do and eating the mud. And I wonder if we've shifted a little bit from what, and therefore when children maybe don't do it in the way that maybe some kids can't build the frigging blocks all the time and don't want to conform to this and they just want to go and eat the sand. And I would say then the kid eating the sand, that's where I would be, I think. I'd go and eat the sand and throw it over somebody. That would be where I wouldn't want to build the blocks. And I wonder if the expectation is you should be doing this at this stage, and when they're not, they think actually we need some help with this because we're not doing these things that we should be doing in play, and we're being mean and all those sorts of things.
But I think the being mean bit is the bit that I often get the referrals for.
Yeah.
So it's it's often, I've had a couple of referrals this week, but they're very typical of ones I'll often have, is my child doesn't have any friends. My child isn't able to play with other children. My child is too shy to play with others. So it's not so much, will you teach my, often it will say on the email or in the phone call, can you teach my child how to play? That's why I want play therapy. But actually, when I delve a little bit underneath, so even if I can't take the referral, if I'm full or if I feel if the distance is too far, I'll always have or offer a 15, 20-minute phone call with the parent or the referrer just to get a sense of actually what is it they're really looking for. And quite often I'll do myself and my colleagues out of a job because it sounds like it's really not play therapy that they're looking for, it's something else. But when I delve into it a little bit, it's more to do with how the parent is perceiving that the child is not playing along with other children. They don't have friends, they don't share. They may be the child that's being mean to the other child, hitting, pinching, biting, scratching, or the child who's having that happen to them a lot and is disappearing. And quite often when we unpick it, and often, and maybe I'll hear the age of the child, they're 3. And I say, developmentally at 3, Western cultural research would say, or studies would say, most 3-year-olds don't share. Most 3-year-olds
Honestly,
play alongside.
yeah.
That's your
sharing. Yeah, sharing
big
is
thing.
right.
That would set you off.
Honestly, that word drives me crazy.
I hear it all the time over the fence with 2-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's not nice. Share. And I think,
Yeah.
you're not built to. You're not built to be sharing.
Even if you can share, do you know, like this is what I will say, like I hear like people say it, and I'll say, okay, if they're sharing their favorite toy, then you share your phone with me. Unlock your phone and let me have half an hour on your phone, the same amount of time that whatever child is sharing their favorite toy with that child. Okay, so let's see. Give me a phone and I'll play on it. I'll play on all your apps. I'll go on all your things. I'll change your password. I'll do all this stuff whilst your kid is sharing their favorite toy there. No, you're not on my phone. That's sharing. You should share your phone. Yeah, but that's their toy. That's what it's like. That is what we're doing. Why would you give your favorite toy to somebody who might break it? Or it drives me crazy. Sharing does.
Yeah, there's the whole the favorite thing, the thing that belongs to me, the thing I've brought into the play. I don't want to offer to others. But there's also the developmental stages, which it doesn't, of course, we don't all fit into those blocks, but there's that sort of early play, which is I'm playing over here. This is the sort of very young ones, 1, 2, young 3-year-olds. I'm over here playing with the blocks, and you're quite close to me, but I'm really not interested in what you're doing. And you're over here playing with the water. And we're both in the same room together. And we're getting along in the fact that we've got our backs to each other. And we might be chatting a bit, but we're really not interested in what the other is doing.
They're not going to share their toys, are they? This is their, do you know what I mean? And I just think, let's have a long turn. That's what I say. Let's have a long turn. You can have the longest turn you want.
There might be some sprottling. And then when they get to late 2, 3, early 4s, there's that, what we sometimes call that parallel play, that maybe we're doing a similar thing. I've got blocks and you've got blocks, and we might both be facing or sitting facing the same direction. But I'm doing my blocks and you're doing your blocks. And I'm not expecting to share my blocks with you, and you're not expected to share your blocks with me. So we would call that parallel play. And I think sometimes in school and nursery settings, we're expecting a development greater than the age of the child. because the next stage, what we think of sometimes as the final stage, is that cooperative play. You're there, I'm here, we've got some blocks in between us, and together we're deciding what happens with those blocks. You might have an idea and go, I'll tell you what, let's build a swimming pool. And I'd be going, yeah, okay, swimming pool, but can we have a cafe next to it? You do the swimming pool, I'll do the cafe. We'll make something together. That's really sophisticated. And we don't often see that until children reach sort of 6, 7.
But they're still not sharing at that point, are they? They've got that joint attention, which I guess when we're doing therapy and that we're trying to build that joint attention, aren't we? And they're doing cooperative play. But the sharing thing is if somebody, even at 8, 9, if they're playing with something and they've been playing with it for 20 minutes, and then all of a sudden you come along and you say, we've been playing with that for 20 minutes, you have to share it, give it to somebody else. That blows my mind. Why would you do that? Why would you do that to anybody? I think that's different than cooperative. We've gone off.
That's a different thing.
Sharing really drives me crazy.
Okay. We'll put sharing to the side for now.
Well, I said on sharing, but cooperative play, and not all children can do it in those stages, can they?
No.
Some children's neurodiversity or something, they're still not going to be able to do it, are they? And they're going to get big feelings, I imagine.
And I think it's those big feelings that I get the referrals for, that you get some of the referrals for therapy, where you're working with the parent and child together. And it's the feelings that are generated around what the child is playish that I think is the thing that brings them to the therapy. Yeah. But as you say, there are many children, and I'm much more alert to this now. I think when I was first practicing 20 years ago, I wasn't aware of this. I'm now aware of the children who come to play therapy, and the play therapy that I practice is generally it's the child and without the parent in the room. Parent is very nearby. Sometimes it's in and out, but generally it's the child and me in the room with a range of resources, which in some ways touch, music, art, dance, drama, dance movement and drama, they're all in the room. A little bit of all of those in the room. And it's me and the child, and I would say to the child, if it was you, Philippa, I'd say, Philippa, this is your time to do and say just about, and that just about is really important for a child like Philippa, is just about, you can do and say just about anything you like. Shall we see what happens? So very much led by the child. And I say that every week to every one of my clients, even if I've seen them for 3 years. There's no assumption that they carry on from where they were at. And I'd say that 50, 60% of the children that I see regularly, quite a vast array of play skills already. And these resources that are in the room are fairly familiar to them. And they are using the resources almost to tell stories from their lives, the things that bother them, come up through the stories, through the dinosaurs, through the dolls, through the Legos, through whatever it is they've chosen to do. The things that are bothering them in life come up through the play. But increasingly, and I don't know whether it's me noticing it more or whether there is actually a change in the children who are coming in, because I notice probably 30, 40% of the children that I see, and the children I hear about in supervision and with students. So I've got quite a small client group, but in a week I probably hear about 25 or 30 children. It's the children who come into the room and are a bit confused by what's in the room. They don't recognize some of the material. Or if they do, they dismiss it and say, I'm 8. I don't do that anymore. I'm done with playing. Or the children who have never had the experience of putting their hand in some sand, who've never had the experience of putting their hands in the water and dipping other glue and paint and stuff in it. They've not had those experiences, and who are quite puzzled by the whole space. I think when I learned to be a play therapist, and I say that thing, you never learn to be a play therapist. When I started the training, finished the training, and started this journey of being a play therapist, I think I came out of that 3 years of training assuming that all children that I was going to see have a lot of play skills or play experience. I don't remember learning about what to do when a child comes in and they're really puzzled by the room, or dismissive of the room, or trash the room. And I think over the 20 years or so that I've been doing this, I've seen a shift in what I'm seeing, and that might be my shift, and it might be a shift in the children. But there are many children for whom I can't now assume that they will be able to use metaphor. They'll be able to use an object to stand in for something else and create the stories about their lives and the things that are making them feel wobbly. I think I'm seeing far less of that. What I'm seeing a lot more of is children who, it seems to me, for the first time, are learning. I hate that, having the experience of manipulating things and making things happen, having agency and freedom to decide what happens with resources. Because so many of them will say, they'll call me Miss, which in UK schools would be very familiar to children. They would tend to call their teachers Miss, Mr, Mrs. They'll say, Miss, am I allowed to do that? Miss, what am I meant to do? Miss, I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do. And it takes them weeks and weeks to build up the courage to decide for themselves what to do. So when a parent is coming to me and saying, teach my child how to play through play therapy, in a sense, that is part of what I'm seeing. But I might actually, if I know that in advance, before we even start, I would probably direct that family to something else. Or just, I've begun to ask a lot more about, so tell me about play in your household. Oh, don't have. I get her to do arts and crafts on a Monday and a Thursday. And on a Friday, we do board games. I think, where is as you said, the being bored, the just sitting with stuff and discovering about yourself through play?
I mean, we did that episode, didn't we, on play and everyday things right back in the beginning. And I guess we both talked about those experiences where you sit with pots and pans and some wooden spoons, or you just get whatever it is. In our house, it was leftover food or stuff that was out of date, out of the cupboard, and mush them together. So you've got that play. But I suppose when you were thinking about that, I was also thinking about, I know you did an interview with Sarah Lloyd, which will be out, I think, in a couple of weeks following this episode. But she talks about the underdeveloped sensory system and how that should develop. So we won't go into that, but that does, I imagine, impact on how children play, because if you don't know your own strength, then you might knock people's sandcastles down or knock the
Mm,
building blocks down that you're cooperatively building, that swimming pool and that cafe. But if I don't have that foundation in my body, then I might knock your swimming pool down, and then you'll go and tell the teacher and say, Miss, Philippa's done this,
mm,
and but maybe I didn't really mean to. Maybe I just don't know where my hand is in relation to the rest of my body, or I
yeah.
can't sit still for long enough because I don't have that head, neck, and shoulder strength. And then you get into all these things around they're not playing nicely, or they're being unkind, or they're being mean. But they're not necessarily, I would imagine, that there's lots of other reasons that go on, because kids
Mm,
in general, I don't think are mean. They might have a big feeling, they might be demonstrating that big feeling, they might not have the capacity for whatever reason. Maybe they don't understand what they're doing with the items, or maybe their body isn't working in the way that they're going to do, or maybe they aren't processing the information the way that we are expecting them to do. But in general, I don't think kids want to be mean to one another. There's often a reason, an underlying reason underneath for it, which all impacts on play, and why people might, parents, adults might think this child needs to learn how to play properly.
I think, yeah, I think that's really important to think about the body that is playing, the hands, the torso, the face, the feet. And so often I see a child in the room who, and remembering this is probably 15 years ago, 5-year-old, a little 5-year-old who was referred by the school to play therapy because of aggression, because of always bumping into other children, hitting other children, sitting on other children. This is before I had met Sarah Lloyd, and I had thought about the sensory system and thought about the body. So apologies to this young man because I didn't really understand you. And indeed, when I went to see him in his class, he was having to sit on a separate carpet to everybody else. Because actually, when I think of him now, he couldn't keep his body upright. And so he needed another child to lean into to keep upright. So he was sat in a corner in not to keep him upright, although it worked the trick. But he was sat in kind of the naughty corner because he was always pushing other children. But when I think about him now, this was a little body that, in fact, it was a very big body, a very overweight, big body that wasn't moving well at all, wasn't moving much. Actually, sitting in the corner allowed him to sit upright.
Yeah.
But then the teachers would say, you've been a good boy now, you've sat really nicely for half an hour, you can come back to the big carpet. But of course, as soon as he came back to the big carpet, his body flopped again and he was pushing other children, he was sent back. So when he came to me, I remember trying to walk across the playground with him even. When I see it through new eyes now, he couldn't walk in a straight line. He needed to hold my hand and lean against me to walk across that big space of the playground.
Mm.
And I remember he got all the Lego. He was one of those children who comes into the room, looks around and just tips everything out. Play therapists, you will be groaning with me because our first thought is, oh my God, I've only got 10 minutes between clients to clear this up. I'm going to wrap up early with this one. He's 5, can't tell the time. We can only turn early because every basket, every box was on the floor. It was a very small room. I was at one end of the room. He was at the other end of the room, probably only about 6 or 7 feet apart. But he then crawled over to me right across all this Lego and it didn't hurt him.
Mm.
Oh, darling, that must be really hurting. Right? There was no sensory
Tactile
system.
systems,
His
yeah.
tactile system wasn't activated at all. And actually, I remember working with him for a whole year, and it's almost like he, through the play therapy, through just being in school, through lots more movement, he did, by the end of the year, he wasn't seen as the aggressive child any longer. But it was mainly because he had learned to have feeling in his own hands and body. And so he didn't need to test out things with other bodies. He didn't need to do that leaning. But I wish 15 years ago I'd understood a lot more than I do now. So would I see that child for play therapy now? Probably not, because I'd be thinking about his body, first of all. I'd be thinking of saying to his school, if you had the OT, the occupational therapist, if you had a sensory assessment done, let's just even look at him ourselves and think, what bodily activities might we put into place first? Because he was a gentle soul. I remember him being very smiley, it was a friendly, gorgeous little thing, but really puzzled that nobody wanted to be with him. And thinking if I had him as a referral now, I would probably want to see him first. If it was a parent or a school, I'd want to just see him, and he may be seen for a couple of weeks and just get a sense of him first. Because where play therapy, I think, fits. Well, I don't know. I think play therapy can serve all sorts of needs, but kind of the real depth that I experience with play therapy is when a child comes to the room with, and however it's come about, lots and lots of ways of being able to express themselves through sound, through art, through drama, through role play, through their bodies, that they come feeling fairly comfortable and skilled in all of those expressions. That Gary Landreth, who's a sort of play therapy guru over in the States, who a lot of play therapists will follow, Gary would use that expression about play being a child's first language.
Yeah, absolutely.
But some of my clients don't have that first language. They really haven't developed that language. But if a child comes and play really is their first language, then the expression of what is bothering them can really be expressed very quickly through what they're doing.
I suppose I'm just wondering about that a little bit, about kind of play being the first language, or you often see a quote on Facebook or Instagram about play being the serious work of children, and that's what they're meant to do, really. And I suppose I'm thinking about like a baby, they play with their hands and feet. They actually don't need anything, do they? They just are mesmerized by their hands and their feet and the lights in the room. And I know we give them rattles and toys and things like that, but actually they don't need that. But what I suppose when you were talking, what I was thinking about was that babies can innately start to play because they start to notice their hands, they start to notice their feet. So there is a beginning of that play language, isn't there? That doesn't really need anybody else other than their needs are being met. So they need to be safe, they need to be warm, they need to be fed, they need to not be stressed in any way. But in a typically developing house where your baby's got everything it needs, they will in themselves start to play. And I suppose what I'm thinking is, and that's the invitation for adults to join that play, to blow the bubbles on their hands, to wiggle their feet a little bit. So they invite us into that communication. They invite us into that play. And then that play develops from there, from the toys we give them, from the food they drop on the floor, from the feeding and all those sorts of things. So what I suppose what I was thinking is there's something that's interrupting that more often. And that's more than children, because what it needs to develop, this is just me thinking, I don't know anything really about this, but what it seems it needs is a connection. It needs that connection with another person to continue to develop. Yeah, from these hands and feet and noticing the things. You then need this connection that says, and we know that for everything for babies, that relationally, that then encourages the development. And then we go on and we explore and we do all these other things. So if there are children now, and you are not the first person that has said this, we know through our podcasts and through our conversations that lots of people are experiencing this reduction, because I don't want to say it's not there, but there's a reduction in the play, the free play, rather than the structure play. There's a reduction in the free play that children can access, and their ability. I interviewed somebody this week who will be out actually in a couple of weeks after this episode is out, who's a nursery school teacher, and she was talking about that change of play in nurseries and things like that. So it seems to me, as a long way of saying that, there seems to be something that is interrupting this natural development that we would expect to happen. And that, I suppose what I wonder is that technology and structuredness interrupting this development. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but two things I think you're saying there is, one, is something happening and restricting children's experience of being free to use their own agency to decide how they play. So that's one thing we're thinking about. Has the education system, has the traffic on the streets, has parents' working patterns constricted to lose themselves in play for an hour, which might have been
screens.
Screens, okay, taken something else.
Yeah, my thought would be is that screens have the biggest impact, because kids are now sat on a screen, sedentary, getting instant gratification from these games, these apps, these things. And that's not about saying don't have screens, but I wonder if play, that is the majority of what play has become.
Yeah, I think it depends partly what's on the screen, because some of what's on a screen could also be free play and creative and moving things and making decisions.
It's not the same, is it? Because it's instant gratification. You're getting it all, and you're stationary, and somebody's feeding it to you. You're not.
Okay, but that is one thing we're wondering about, and it's what, as you say, a lot of people in our conversations that we've had, and that's why, in a sense, we're having more and more of the interviews and conversations. Yeah. Is something shifting a bit? We have climate change, and we're noticing that there's gradual change, and we're not just beginning, we are, faced with the consequences of this seismic change going on. Is there a sort of global change in the way little people, and I think grown-ups as well, play? If we were to do some research into play and the stages of play now, a lot of that research was done in the 40s and 50s. If we were to do that now, would it come up with different results? So we've got that big question, and in a sense, this podcast has become more and more about that. What is changing in the play arena for children and young people? But going back to what you also said that there about does a baby innately begin to play with their own fingers, play with their mouths, play with their feet? Is that simply exploring where they end, or beginning to think, oh, I can have an intention and I can make something happen. I can see an object, pair of glasses here. I can see that object and desire that object. I can pick it up. Well, yeah, that's amazing. You can see little ones just spending hours doing that. So would I call that play? Would I call that getting to know who I am? Both of those things. But we're also talking about relationship. Is play met by another who recognizes that you've done that? And as I'm doing this, there might be somebody over there going, Julie, you just picked those up. Fantastic, look at you. And that says to me, oh, that's approved of. That's getting a joyful voice from my big person. I'll do it again. Done it again. So would that exploration of self that seems to go on with 3-4-month-old babies, once they realize they've got these extremities and they can do something with them, if that's not met with a sound or a sight or a joy in some way that says, oh, keep doing that, would that stop? So they need another person.
Yeah, and that's what I wonder is if there's a point, I move my hands around a lot, I know. I wonder if there's a point where it's encouraged, because and I'm talking now about typically developing parents who have the capacity to meet the emotional needs. We know that there are parents and that don't have the capacity for whatever reason to meet babies' needs. So what I'm talking about is you're typically developing family. That's what I'm talking about. So I would expect that, and this is just what I'm thinking, is that when they're babies, when they're young, 3, 4, 6 months, 8 months, and you're doing those milestone developments, that there is that interaction about, oh gosh, he's sat up today, he's picked up today, he's used the spoon today, because that's what you are wanting your child to do. But I wonder if there's a point, and I suppose I'm coming to screens and structured play, really. There's a point that relational thing is replaced or interrupted more. And I'm not saying it's not there at all, but I wonder if there's a change to standing in front of and watching TV. Or often, even in pubs now, they have tellies. I will go out and I will see little ones watching Peppa Pig, sat in a high chair waiting for dinner. Then the adults are talking, and the little person who's quite little is watching Peppa Pig on the tally, and or on a phone or something like that. Whereas I guess I wonder, before screens, or for families that can't afford to do those things, you would have to engage with that toddler to stop them getting bored and trying to climb out of you would be giving them the whatever you could find off the table, or rooting whatever you'd got in your bag out, and
cheese.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? And you would be, so they would be playing.
Yeah.
It would still be for the same reason, is to contain them in the high chair so they're not screaming the place down, so you can have dinner. But they are using something different when they're playing with your keys and the empty thing that you've taken all the salt things out, that little box. That's what I used to give that to my son, and he'd put the keys in there and then he'd tip it out. And do you know what I mean? Whereas now you're watching Peppa Pig, or you're playing Roblox, or rather than colouring, or and it's a different play for the same reason. I'm not saying I didn't want to contain my kid in a high chair when I was out for dinner. Of course I did. But it's different. And I wonder if that is interrupting that development of play.
Yeah. So going back to why do parents or why do the big people refer children for play therapy? And very occasionally, children refer each other. One of my best referrals was from a little boy. He was just finishing after a year, and he referred his friend. And he says, because this play stuff, yeah, it's great. And my friend, he's a bit messed up, miss. He needs to come to you. And actually, it was a brilliant referral. And I saw his friend for a year. But why did he refer his friend? Why do parents, why do school staff, social workers refer children? And I think it's the relationship that is also a huge part of what brings a child to therapy. So I think when I was learning about the beginnings of play therapy, when I was a student, what I received from the training was that play therapy can help children process trauma, difficult past and present events, a bereavement, an abuse, the death of a sibling, and a house move, a fire, but through their innate play skills, which I'm beginning to question now, they would use stories and metaphor to rework that story. Mm-hmm. That's one thing that play therapy does. But I think it presumed, this is my thinking, and other play therapists will probably be shouting at the screen or at their headphones now going, oh, that's not true. My experience is that so often the child comes without the play, I'm going to call them play skills, but also that they come with sort of an absence of being able to make that therapeutic relationship. Because in order to do the processing bit, you need to trust the person that you're going to expose all of this with. Same for us as adults.
And that's the bit that I think's getting interrupted, is the relational bit.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think even when they're coming to learn to play, this is what I'm thinking is actually, what are they coming to learn? A different type of relationship. It doesn't mean they don't have a relationship, because they do. They're clearly secure and loved and all those sorts of things. I know this is what I'm talking about, typically developing families, but there's still something missing in that relational play.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that's the bit.
That's what so as well as now finding myself in the playroom and noticing children having first-time experiences of some ways of playing, because for whatever reason they've missed out on some of those stages of play. They haven't done sensory play, they haven't done role play, they haven't done small world pretending to be something play. They've missed out on that for some reason, and we've talked about that in another episode. I think I'm increasingly seeing children who are very mistrustful of a relationship, or for whom having me in the room is a real puzzle to them. It's almost, if I left the room in the 50-minute session and went to the kitchen and made my dinner and came back, they wouldn't notice. And I have to keep inviting myself into relationship with them. So the child who sits in the corner and with their back to me and is clearly playing out some sort of story that isn't nervous of me, isn't deliberately turning their back to make sure I don't see what they're doing, because I think there'd be a lot of meaning in that. There's a lot of relationship in that. It's the child who's just not used to having anybody else in the room while they're playing and doesn't think that anybody else will be interested. And so I've learned to through supervision and talking with other people to invite myself in to that child's play, because I see that one of the things that could perhaps really help them in life outside the room is noticing other people and enjoying the relationship, resourcing themselves from somebody else.
Yeah.
But this is often, it might be a child who doesn't have siblings, or a child who has multiple siblings. And in order to keep their own toys and everything safe, they've just learnt to play on their own. But consequently, they don't have any friends at school.
No. One of the things it's also making me think about is that over the last probably little period of time, what I've noticed is I've had some littler ones, younger ones, because my little ones have now got a bit bigger, but they are coming through, and they are being animals in the relational, like pets, like a dog or a cat or something like that. So they'll do some play, but actually to receive the really connected part, they almost need to be a dog or a cat. They do need to be a dog or a cat where I can stroke them and I can feel, because it almost feels like it's acceptable if you're a dog or a cat to be stroked, to be fed, to be snuggled in the blanket and all the cushions and talked to it in those ways. That actually, if you're a pet, then actually that's really fine. But yeah, so that again makes me think about actually is is that they can see that relational thing with the pet is present, and actually I can get it this way, but for me, no, this is a bit too odd in my tummy right now. I can't deal with it as a little person, but I can deal with it if I'm the pet cat.
Yeah, so again, that would be think about. I mean, I'm role playing. I'm in a metaphor, and I could be related to as a character.
Yeah.
But being related to me directly as myself is much more scary.
Yeah.
It's much more vulnerable. It's much more exposing to be just me and Julie.
Mm.
If I take us off into a story, so effectively your little ones, I know it's play you're doing, but in a sense, they're taking you off into a story of carer and pet.
Yeah.
Then they can receive what they need to receive in that way and maybe get used to it and try out different ways of responding. What happens if the cat scratches a bit? What happens if the dog barks or bares its teeth? What will Philippa do?
Mm-hmm.
I think that happens in play therapy. It's almost like I would think of that. Sometimes they'd say to children, let's put it on the stage. Because if we put it on the stage, we can both feel safer, and we can be really angry with me, and you can really hate me, and you can really swear at me, and you can really do big pushing with me. If you're the monster and I'm the mouse, then we can really get into those big feelings that for now feel too scary to do as you as the child and me as Julie. So the safety of being the cat or the dog.
Yeah.
Can be, for me, that's a really helpful tool for children to be able to be Superman. And when you're 5, you're not just pretending to be Superman, you really are Superman. I've got little people I could think of in my life in the past who've spent whole days being a cat, and their food had to be served on the floor, and they had to crawl up the stairs to bed. And as you said, stroked, that there was something about getting their needs met, but through a metaphor. Didn't last for very long.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a really good next episode, Julie.
About animals?
About that metaphor and about that play in that way, thinking about how we engage. Sometimes it's the third thing we've talked about Winnicott before, and actually that one step removed. I'm just aware that we're running out of time, but that was a really interesting kind of conversation and thought. So I wonder if that's something we can come back to next.
Yeah, I think so. And I think going back to what we started this episode with, which is really, what is play therapy? Is it therapy to help you play? And noticing that I don't think, and perhaps you don't think, and others, I don't know, maybe agree or disagree, that music, art, and the other creative arts therapists don't get referrals that say, help my child how to do art.
Yeah.
But I certainly get referrals, they help my child to play, but it means so many things. It means to interact with others. It means to get to know myself. It means to be able to have some freedom to find my own agency. And it's about, and the bit we've just got onto now, it's about relationship. And that's what I find so many children doing in the therapy, is testing out relationship. I might see them for 20 weeks. There's no sort of processing of a trauma, which in a sense now I'm beginning to think is more the sort of higher end therapy.
Yeah.
But their first 20 weeks could be all about who am I and what's this relationship thing about? And it might all be done through a game of snakes and ladders for 20 weeks.
Yeah.
And I'm finding that increasingly fascinating, the different sort of levels of play therapy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's a whole other episode, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, those are what. Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy. I would just say, if you've liked it, could you click on our YouTube channel, subscribe to us, give us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that really helps us, and any of our social media things. If you can just leave a comment, let us know what you think. That's really helpful as well. Or if there's an episode that you think, actually, can you talk about this? Or if you think there's any guests that you think, actually, these people would be really great, or you want to come on yourselves, let us know. So thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Pondering Play and Therapy.
Bye-bye.